In today's video, we will be taking a look at the RX 570 8GB version in 2024. So as you guys know, this is a really old card now, and unfortunately it is really quite limited now, but let's just see what it can do in a few modern games and just see, is it any good nowadays? I mean, I think this is like a 8-year-old card, or maybe even more now. I'll put the actual release date below. This is the XFX version, and it's actually quite nice, to be fair. I mean, you know, it's got the nice fans there. It actually has the fan stop as well, so if you're not using your GPU too much, the fans will stop, which is actually quite nice. This also has a backplate as well, so it's actually quite good. And I purchased this for about £50 actually on eBay, which is actually quite a bargain, I thought, and decent price. So I thought we'll give it a go and let's see what this little graphics card can do, eh? Anyway, yes, I've pulled up my laptop here and I've got the results, and I will put the overlay for the games so you can actually just sort of see the game footage as well and see like all the MSI stats, afterburner stats and all that sort of stuff, so that's also there for you. Hopefully you can sort of see me over the laptop screen. But anyway, so we'll start off with the easier titles and then we'll go on to the more sort of difficult titles right at the end. But the actual test PC was a Ryzen 3 3100, which is a 4-core 8-thread processor, and also we had 16 gigabytes of RAM, which was DDR4 32 megahertz, and a 2x8 gigabyte kit. So pretty good. The Corsair Vengeance LPX one, so that's pretty good. So our first title is Forza Horizon 5, and we've tested this at 1080p low and 1080p medium. And we had at 1080p low an average of 78, a minimum of 62 and a maximum of 99. And at 1080p medium we had an average of 68, a minimum of 53 and a maximum of 85. So as you can see there, at 1080p medium an average of 68 frames per second is actually really good. Now Forza Horizon 5 isn't the most particularly demanding game, and there is more demanding games on the list, but I think that's a decent benchmark really for such an old card, and for quite a cheap graphics card as well, because on eBay they're around about sort of 55 to about 65, maybe even 70, but you can maybe get local deals as well. But I think this is still a decent card, the RX 570. Obviously, do bear in mind I would advise getting the 8GB version now, because 4GB really is just too little nowadays in modern games. So 8GB is going to be far better. Plus, if you're selling PCs, it's going to look better having the 8GB rather than the 4GB one, isn't it? Now, moving on to our second title is Far Cry 6, and at 1080p low an average of 73, a minimum of 66 and a maximum of 78. And the 1080p medium results was an average of 63 and a minimum of 75 and a maximum of 58. So even at 1080p medium there, an average of 63 frames per second, that's really good for Far Cry 6. Still a fairly demanding game, obviously not too bad in terms of how demanding it is. Our third title is Shadow of the Tomb Raider, and at 1080p low an average of 92, a minimum of 70 and a maximum of 151. And at 1080p medium an average of 69, nice, random gaming HT reference there, minimum 53 and a maximum of 109. So yeah, I mean that's a really good result. 1080p medium average of 69, so pretty much 70 there. Shadow of the Tomb Raider, again older title, but it's not too bad, is it? I mean, it's still a title that, you know, I think a lot of people play, and it is a few years older now, but again, it sort of shows that this graphics card can kind of do it. Now, obviously, things like esports, which I haven't tested those esports titles, but those titles are going to be easily be able to run like 100 frames per second, even at 1080p medium average. So, you know, esports probably even more even, but sort of your esports like Counter-Strike 2 and Fortnite and probably even Apex Legends and stuff like that, you know, it's all going to be fine running those games. Obviously Roblox, Minecraft, it's all going to be fine running on those. So we will actually the last two games are a lot more demanding, so I will go on to that now. For the last two games, they are Cyberpunk 2077 and Starfield. Now I've tested at 1080p low with FSR balanced, was the first one, and then I've tested only Cyberpunk 2077 at 1080p low because basically Starfield just wasn't worth it because it just couldn't handle that game basically. So yeah, Cyberpunk 2077 1080p low with FSR balance, which is the sort of AMD, like a software with average of 61, a minimum of 50, and a maximum of 72. Now 1080p low without any FSR on, just running it natively for Cyberpunk 2077 was an average of 46, a minimum of 36, and a maximum of 55. So as you can see there, the averages really do knock down, and that's probably about 25% loss or something that you're getting, sort of like 15 frames per second that you're losing. So yeah, FSR certainly is the way to go if you are really wanting to play Cyberpunk 2077 on an RX 570. I don't recommend it, and I think if you're getting up to those sort of more modern games, you are going to have to get a better graphics card because this just can't handle it really. Anything sort of like 2022 onwards, I would say, even 2020, 2021, those sort of games, you're pushing it for this graphics card really. And obviously with our last game, Starfield, yeah, I just think that it's just so poor really, the results, but it is what it is, and it is an old graphics card, and unfortunately it just doesn't perform just quite as much as we want nowadays. But it's still decent if, like I say, if you are going to do esports titles and more easier to run titles and fairly older titles now, like 5-6 year old titles. But anyway, Starfield 1080p low with FSR balanced was an average of 29, a minimum 26, and a maximum of 32. So maybe playable, 30 frames per second, you could probably just about play it. But again, for me, yeah, just about playable. But again, it just looked horrible when I was recording it, and you're probably going to see from the footage here that the game just looks horrible at FSR balance 1080p low, and it's just not really worth it. I think I did try it at 1080p low, but it was like 15 FPS average, so it just wasn't worth it. It's unplayable at that point. So yeah, those sort of games are just going to be unplayable with the RX 570, even if you go with the 8GB version over the 4GB. Now obviously I would be looking quite a bit higher if you do want to run these sort of more modern games. Really 6GB VRAM cards, even they are kind of like on their last legs now as well. Like the GTX 1660 is probably just about hanging on in there. The 1660 Super is probably sort of like the minimum graphics card I'd probably recommend nowadays if you are wanting to go up to those sort of more higher titles and more modern titles. But yeah, if you are looking to build a very budget PC, maybe like a £250, maybe the £300 mark, you can get yourself a sort of £50-60 graphics card, stick that in, even a Ryzen system. There will be coming up on the channel a build for around about £300 that I've done, which actually includes this graphics card, which actually does have the same processor in, the Ryzen 3 3100. Obviously do subscribe to actually see that. Now, as I said, this graphics card is an older card and it is limited, but overall, if you're looking for some very basic entry sort of gaming and you're not really too bothered about RTX and all that sort of stuff, if you just want a basic graphics card to get you up and running, then this is gonna do the job. So yeah, I hope you really like that, guys, and hopefully I haven't waffled on too much, but yeah, I think overall it is very much budget now, and I'd probably say it's probably a bit too budget. And most people probably who are listening to this probably are looking for at least £100 graphics card or up. But if you do want something very cheap, around about the £50-60 mark, maybe you could even get it cheaper on Facebook Marketplace, the RX 570 is still a decent go-to graphics card. And if you look at the Nvidia sort of side, you're probably only looking at like a GTX 1050 Ti, which this is actually still better than a GTX 1050 Ti. So yeah, I mean overall, go in the Nvidia side, I wouldn't go Nvidia if you're going around 60 to 70 or even 50 to 60 pound mark. I would go AMD with the RX 570 on that one, or maybe even an RX 580 if you can find one for that sort of price. But yeah, I think that wraps it all up, guys. Please like the video, obviously. Please comment if you have any comments on this graphics card, or want me to test any other games, or just obviously leave a comment for supporting the channel, basically. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.